Hey, everybody, it's Sam Amico of HoopsWire.com back here on the 330 to go Cavaliers NBA show. Every time it's called a little something different, and every time I'm sitting somewhere different, it seems like. But eventually, we'll get that all cleared up, and I'll be sitting in the same spot. Welcome. Happy Thursday, or depending on when you're watching this, maybe Friday. Happy Friday. It'd be Friday, right? The weekend. Here to always talk Cavaliers and NBA. And it seems like every week it's a little bit of a different discussion, right? A couple weeks ago when we started the show, the Cavs were cruising at 117 of 18. And, now it's been a little clunkier, a lot of injuries, a lot of key injuries. However, as promised, John Sabol from Fox 8 and the Cavaliers on the Break podcast is with us tonight to break it all down, probably tell a few jokes. And John, as I promised, that you are a fountain of Cavaliers trivia dating back to one of our favorite eras, if not our favorite era, the early 90s of Mark Price, Brad Daugherty, and even after that. I think you've even had some like Larry Hughes trivia in there at some point. So anyway, John, welcome to the show. Happy to have you. And tell us a little bit about what you got going on. I don't know if you can hear me, John. Can you hear me okay? Because I can't hear you. I got you. You know what? I had your mic muted, so that was on me. I'm still working on your mic here, buddy. Anyway, as I try to get John so I can hear him, I think that there's probably a problem with my mic. Just hang on one second, John, and I'll try to bring you in as best I can. Okay, so we're going to try again with John Sabol here in a second. Having some problems here with his mic. I'm not sure if that's something we can get figured out here shortly. It seems like we're having a little bit of technical difficulties, but that said, we will have to have John leave and then re-enter for when he can come back in. But right now, talking about the Cavs, last night loss in Atlanta, that was tough. Very shorthanded. Probably had, just second night of a back-to-back. Probably had just a little bit of a feeling of exhaustion. Fell behind by 21 points against the Hawks, and were able to eventually work out to the point where they came back and took a lead at the end of the third quarter on a Karis LeVert corner three, made it 89-87, and then just ran out of gas. So we are going to try to bring John back one more time.
How about that? Is that better?
Oh, now there's the lovely voice I've come to know and love. Anyway.
Gotta love technology, Sam, right? Gotta love it.
I'm probably the least, for a guy who created his own website 6 years ago, I'm probably the least, I'm probably the most technologically impaired person there is. And somebody who does this, somebody who does the podcast with you.
Right.
Yeah, I just don't know what I'm doing. So I thought it was me. I just assumed it was me. That
we'll just blame it on blame it on me. How about that? I don't know what happened.
Hey, we're here. That's a good idea. That's what I usually do anyway, right? I usually blame you when things don't go right in any area of life.
That's true. That's true. I'm just used to it.
Right. It's just common. So tell us about now. How long have you been at Fox 8? Is it 2 years?
Yeah, a little more than 2 years now. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Weekend sports anchor.
Sports anchor, weekday sports reporter, weekend news anchor, co-host of Friday Night Touchdown, or co-anchor Friday Night Touchdown with with a bunch of different guys: PJ Ziegler, Dan Coughlin, John Telledge, Ken Carman, co-anchor of Orange and Brown Countdown, our Browns pregame show on Fox 8 with Ken Carman and Andre Knott and Bernie Kosar and PJ Ziegler. Wear a lot of many hats. So, but it's all fun. It's good to be back.
Co-host the Cavs on the Break podcast, which you and I are recording later tonight.
We will be recording it later tonight. Yes, I'm excited because I haven't been on the podcast in a few weeks. Chase Smith has been. I know he's been on your show here.
Yep.
I think it was last week. I was down in Florida last week, but yeah, haven't been on a podcast with you in probably a couple weeks since we did our live. You guys did your live show there, at Whitey's in Richfield. Our one of our favorite restaurants, by the way.
Absolutely, one of our favorites. In fact, you and I may do another podcast there at some point, right?
Yeah. We are. We need to figure out what day we want to do that because for those, 330 to go here. I mean, people know watching this about Whitey's in Richfield. They have to because that used to be the old stomping grounds for many Cavaliers, Cavalier greats and former NBA Hall of Famer or current Hall of Famer, former NBA All-Stars back in the heyday of the Richfield Coliseum. That place has a wealth of history when it comes to that. I mean, from Michael Jordan to Larry Bird going in there. Of course, the Cavs greats, our favorite era that we always talk about.
Yeah. There's a story on that about George Karl.
Yes.
That you know well. George Karl, the former Cavs coach who later went on to coach the Warriors, the Sonics, and Carmelo Anthony's Nuggets. In fact, he took the Sonics to the finals. But he was first in the NBA. His first head coaching job in the NBA was the Cavaliers, right? 83, 84?
I believe that's correct,
Somewhere in there. But anyway, so his shoes are in Whitey's, correct?
Yes. There's a funny story because John, I forget his last name, the owner, his father
Whitey?
has since I guess it would be Whitey. I don't know. I think so. Maybe. Yeah. His father owned the place, started the place back in the heyday, and now John runs it. The story goes in 1986, because George Karl coached the Cavs 84, 85, 86, 3 years. And those weren't so good years. The ball started to get rolling a little bit 87, right? 88, right? So Karl just missed that era. And he would always go into Whitey's in Richfield and would talk to John and his dad. And Whitey's is known for three things. Well, known for many things, but they're really known for three things. It's called Whitey's Booze and Burgers. So there's two of their things they're known for: booze and burgers. And they're chili. They have some of the best chili you'll ever have.
Yeah.
And George Karl, the story goes, he'd always come in there and he would say, "I need a hotter chili. I need it hotter." And so the cooks would put more peppers and make it hotter and hotter. And so he would always just do that. He'd come in there after practice, after games. He was just that guy at the corner of the bar eating chili. So one day it was, I don't know, kind of snowy, slushy day in 1986. And he walks in there and he takes his shoes and he puts them on the bar. And he looks to the owner, John's father, and he says, "I'm not going to be needing these boots anymore, these high top shoes or boots or whatever." And I'm like, "Well, why?" He's like, "Well, I got good news and bad news. The good news is the bad news is the Cavs just fired me. The good news is the Golden State Warriors just hired me. So I'm moving out to California. I'm not going to need these shoes anymore, these boots." So what he did was he signed them, and then John's father nailed them to the wall, and they're there. They're there now. And I showed them to you when we went there a couple years ago. And you'll see George Karl's signature on the shoe.
You know what's amazing?
What's that?
Yeah. If you go into Whitey's, there's George Karl's shoes with the signature. But what's amazing is that George Karl therefore had no shoes on this winter, snowy, slushy day and walked outside and in his bare feet. So
and Sam, he walked out in the snow into the car. He walked out into the snow and drove home. It's great.
Yeah.
Great place. That place, it's got a lot of history. There's old Coliseum, Richfield Coliseum seats in there. They've got the old bench from, I think it was Cleveland Arena on there they used to sit on. They have the old banner from the 76 Central Division title. A lot of other Indians and Browns stuff. Just a really great place to go and eat, grab a burger, grab food. They got volleyball courts in the back. But I got to say, bring cash. They only take cash, but they do have an ATM in there.
I forget every time they only take cash. But fortunately, they do have the ATM. You know, now that you mentioned it, By the way, George Karl was a coach of the 84-85 team that started 2-19, which was the worst start ever to eventually turned it around and went to the playoffs. And then they lost to Larry Bird's Boston Celtics in the first round, but the final score of that series was tied. So that's how close the games were. Yeah, and they're the only team started 2-19. In fact, real quick, I'll tell you a story. One time, Dan Gilbert just happened to be near me, and he came up. This is when LeBron first left the Cavs back in 2010, 2011? Was that when he left, 2010, went to Miami? Mm-hmm. And I just happened to cross paths with Cavs owner Dan Gilbert, and he said, what do you think about the team? At that point, they were 7-9 or something. Yeah. So they were playing right around 500. And I said, they're doing okay. They're a lot better than that Cavs team that went 2-19 and made the playoffs back in 85. Dan Gilbert had no idea about that team. He said, "Are you serious?"
You told me that story before.
He ended up looking it up. Yeah. But of course, that Cavs team that I'm referring to that first year without LeBron had lost 26 straight, which was the NBA record until the lowly Detroit Pistons broke that this year with 28 straight. So, John, anyway, what I was getting at before all of that.
I have one more George Karl for you. He was 33 when he took the Cavs job in 84.
Yeah, I knew he was young.
Yeah,
because he's what, early 70s now?
He's 72 now,
right? So that's
72.
Yeah, so 33 years old when he took that job. He had a fiery personality then. He still does today.
Yes, he does.
But anyway, you mentioned that Whitey's has all these super cool items, like chairs and stuff. Well, you have that, and probably right around you somewhere.
I do. I have a
I sat in them.
You did. I have a Richfield Coliseum chair. It's actually right behind me. I've got a Cleveland Municipal Stadium chair, a Gund Arena chair. I pretty much have a stadium seat from almost every stadium except League Park in Cleveland. The Richfield Coliseum story is interesting because I knew a guy who he and his brother used to work as a vendor at the Coliseum, and like a couple days before they tore it down, they knew the security guard, and they walked through there and grabbed a bunch of stuff. And I knew a different guy who must have just crossed paths with them, knew a different security guard who went in there and took stuff.
Wow.
And he lives out in California, and he grabbed Mark Price's locker room chair, and he still has it. And I've asked Mark if he wanted it, and Mark says, "Yeah, I don't think my wife will like
that." Yeah. That's pretty cool. So, do you have? I thought there was a sign or something you had to maybe. Oh, yeah. You have a sign from where?
The Coliseum. It is a sign from the same guy. His name's Bob Busser. He is a.
Oh yeah.
He is. I don't know what you'd call him. He's a hobby that he travels to abandon or arenas or stadiums that are about to be torn down, and you can look him up. He's got a phenomenal website that has been. Man, he is.
What's the name again?
Bob Busser.
I'm
actually going to be having him on my podcast soon with my brother. Okay. He goes across the country from college, minor leagues, all 4 professional sports teams, United States, Canada. I think he may go down to Mexico. And he goes to these old stadiums before they're torn down, or maybe a year or 2 before they're torn down, or maybe a day before somehow. And he just takes pictures. Back in the day, he would do this with just film. And then he would scan when technology advanced. He would scan them, and he made a website in the 90s. And he probably has thousands of pictures on his computer of this. And he went through. He was one of the last people to walk through Cleveland Municipal Stadium, one of the last people to walk through Richfield Coliseum, Cleveland Arena, which was before the Coliseum. And then in the late 80s, part of League Park was still standing. It was like the lower grandstand of League Park, which underneath it just so happens to have the old Indians clubhouse. And that was still standing as late as the late 80s. And then they tore that down, and he was one of the last people to walk through there. Anyway, so he has all these different pictures and stuff. And so he had this sign that he grabbed from the Coliseum that I think he said he took it off a wall into a room, a media room or something. And I'm reading it right now. It's downstairs in my basement, and it says Coliseum alcoholic beverage policy. And it basically saying under Ohio liquor license, no alcohol beyond this sign. So it's pretty cool. It's probably a sign that probably,
Wow.
about this big, probably cost all of $2 to make in the 70s and probably still worth that. But I think that's very cool. It's got a lot of character to it.
I wonder if the alcohol policy is the same then as it is today, or today as it was then.
You know what, Sam?
Probably,
think about this.
Probably not.
Because back in the day, well, before you, well, maybe you in your early years, journalists were allowed to drink. They had beer in
No, that was before me.
They had beer in the press box of some of these games, and these guys weren't going crazy.
Beer and cigarettes. They were smoking in there.
Which is
there
funny.
Some legendary sports writers who were smokers.
I remember,
and they would.
Here's a good 2007. I was interning at Fox 8. Now that I work, 2007. My job was that summer was to be a reporter intern to follow a camera to do Indians pregame and postgame. And I am walking down the hallway. I believe this was interleague, and the Indians were playing. There were two different games. There was George Halas, who was the legendary broadcaster for, I think, the Phillies, right? And then there was
I don't know.
And then there was
he was like the Mets or Yankees. What? I don't know.
I don't know.
I'm not a baseball guy.
Yeah. Ernie Harwell did the Tigers. So, or George Callis, I believe his name was. It was Ernie Harwell and George Callis, like these two major big icon guys. Well, they just filled up the interleague, and then there's a first game of the Tigers series. And I'm walking down the press box down behind at Progressive Field, then Jacobs Field. And I see Ernie Harwell walking, and I see him, and this is a legend of a man, an old man, legend broadcaster with a cigarette in his hand. And he like says, "Hi, kid," and walks into the booth. In between, it was like the 7th inning stretch or something. And I'm like, it's 2000, mid 2000s. He shouldn't be smoking but hey, when you're
cigarette
a legend,
while he's calling the game, you're going to tell him. You're
right.
going to say, "Hey, you got to put that out." Probably not. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, I will tell you this. Probably in 20. I don't remember exactly the year, but I'll go up and cover some of the Cavs Pistons games in Detroit when they were playing at Auburn Hills, which I believe was like 2013 or 14. It had to have been because I was up there for Kyrie Irving's rookie year.
Mm-hmm.
They were still serving alcohol to the press. The media, like when we were writing our stories, they'd ask if you wanted one. They had a whole cooler. And then probably I'm thinking that, they moved downtown, the Pistons, into this little Caesars Arena, and I'm pretty sure that they have alcohol there still. I don't know. I haven't been in a couple of years. I obviously don't drink because I got to drive all the way back to I'm not much of a drinker, but I got to drive all the way back to Cleveland, Akron anyway after the game, which is, that's a long drive when you've had a sip of alcohol.
Sure.
I will say this, and then we're going to talk about today's Cavs.
Sure.
One of the best stories, I know that I've told you this, but I'm going to tell everybody. One time in Detroit, so it's Little Caesars Arena, so they have obviously endless pizza for the media.
Mm-hmm.
And basically for their media dining, they have, in my opinion, probably the best food in the league. I can't imagine anybody tops this. It's always great for the media.
Really?
And all you got to do when you go up to the line is show your press credential, and then they let you through the line. You have a whole buffet with obviously Little Caesars pizza, but it also has like healthy food and whatever you want. And it's always top of the line. It's like a 5-star restaurant there, and it's free for the media. Or, so sometimes coaches or executives will go into the media area to eat, and they'll go in, and all they got to do is show their pass, and they can go through the line. Well, one time in Detroit, this was probably 3 years ago, I go in, I show my pass, I sign the sheet with my name, and she's like, go right ahead. And I look behind me as I'm going through the line and putting food on my tray, and I hear a little commotion over where you come into the line. And I
Mm-hmm.
look back, and it's Cavaliers president of basketball operations, Kobe Altman. And the woman sitting at the chair who checks you in says, and what do you do for the Cavaliers if you work for them? Kobe had forgotten his press pass or
Oh.
his identification, and he
Mm-hmm.
was going through the food line, and he was right behind me, and she, she was very stern with him. And what do you do for the Cavs if that's what if you work for them? And he said,
Mm-hmm.
I work in basketball operations. And she just looked at him and rolled her eyes, and she said, you know what? This time it's fine, but you need a credential from now on. So go ahead and sign in, and you can go through the line too. And Kobe Altman was very polite, handled it very well, and was like, thank you very much, ma'am. I'm very sorry. So he got his food and went and sat down. I got my food, got a drink, and passed his table. And I told him, I said, should have started your own website. I had no trouble getting through the line. So he he thought that was funny. Yeah,
You've got the
he had a
nice
good time.
witty. You always have a nice witty comeback to like a day in
Someone
the
else's,
life.
if it's my own embarrassment, I stay quiet about it. But if it's somebody else's embarrassment, yeah, I can come up with some good material. So
Well,
yeah,
here's a. You're right. Kobe Altman's a great guy, very down
yeah,
to earth. I think he married a Cleveland girl, so he's already, no matter what happens in his career going forward, he's always ingrained in our society, right?
right.
You mentioned we'll put a bow on this alcohol sports media conversation, but I remember when I worked in West Virginia 15 years ago, my first TV job, I was working in Beckley, West Virginia. You worked in Bluefield, right down the road in newspaper.
And
Bluefield
Wheeling too. Yeah,
and
but yeah,
Wheeling. Yep.
Bluefield. Yep.
I was covering the inaugural Greenbrier Classic. It's a PGA tournament, which is now defunct. It's not around anymore. They
I
canceled it.
remember that tournament. Yeah, it's a big deal.
It was.
Yeah.
They canceled it a couple years ago. I think COVID kind of helped, push them away from it. Now there's a live tournament there at the Greenbrier. Anyway, so the first year, which was awesome, Tiger didn't go there. He went there 1 year. I think it was like the second or third year. Anyway, so we're done. We're in there in TV, we have a 5 o'clock show and a 6 o'clock show. And then we got to get our stuff ready for the, then 11 o'clock show. And, we're doing, then we have to tape a special one day. And so we're doing all this extra stuff while the tournament is now like for that day. I think it was like round one was all the golfers were off the course by like, 6 or 7 o'clock. And this is middle of the summer. And so all the other writers, they're just sitting back, they're relaxing. They're done. They're published stories in there.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, someone from the Greenbrier, hospitality team is pushing a trash can on wheels in the media room. I'm like, that doesn't look like a trash can. Then she moves. I see a big, tall, it's from a distance, a big, tall, like, what is that shiny? Oh, that's a tap. Oh, that's a keg. And they brought a
Yeah.
keg in there for all
Yeah.
the writers to have in there. It
Yeah.
was funny. And
Yeah, no, that is how it operated. When I first started in Wheeling, West Virginia, at the newspaper there, I remember we had a separate area for the sports department, and I would go in there. I remember my first day in there, and people were smoking in the sports area, like the sports editor and other people. And when I started in Wyoming too, before I was in West Virginia, I was in Wyoming, so I have the two worst states that start with W covered. But I went to I remember my first day on the job in Wyoming. It was September 9th, 1994. I can't tell you when I started anything else, any other job, but I remember when I started that day because I opened the door and I was like, well, here we go, the start of my career. I didn't know it would last this long, but I mean, we're coming now on the 30-year anniversary. September 9th.
How about that?
September 9th, 2024, you and Chase and I will have to have, like a big 30-year Sam Amico party.
Let's
and
do
we'll
it.
smoke cigarettes and drink beer like the old guys. But
We got to wear a suit like the old guys used to wear, though.
yeah, disheveled and be grumpy all the time. That was what, when you were growing up, at least when I was growing up, that was what a sports writer was. But anyway, so I went into this place and I said, here we are, the start of my career, Rawlins, Wyoming, the Rawlins Daily Times. And I opened the door. I thought I'd be there 6 months by the way, but I was there 6.5 years. So I opened the door.
That's wild.
Not in Rawlins. I went from Rawlins to Casper after a year, which was like the statewide paper. So I was a much bigger deal. But when I walked into the Rawlins Daily Times, I opened the door, and there's the editor, and this is like noon on a Monday. You're starting on a Monday, and I walk in, and there's the editor, the head of advertising, and I think the publisher, all in the publisher's office, just sitting there and smoking a cigarettes, and and the head of advertising had like a scotch or something. And I just thought, wow, this is truly not only a newspaper, but a newspaper in Wyoming. So yeah, times have really, really changed, and perhaps that we should start a whole separate podcast or show someday on newspapers, because I worked there 11 years before.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it might have even been longer. No, 2006 was my last year. So 12 years of working at newspapers. My last year was finally at the Sandusky Register, and I just assumed I'd be bouncing around from small newspapers the rest of my career, until I found a niche on the internet, and Fox Sports Ohio called, and then I met you, and everything's been golden since.
Golden and better, right? Well, I think I don't know how much I had anything to do with that, but I think for the casual fan or reader or listener or viewer, probably doesn't realize that in media, whether you're a writer like you, old newspaper writer that have now converted to digital, or radio personality that has now done a lot of podcasts or TV or vice versa, whatever realm, whenever you're watching, listening, or reading them, this is not their first job. They were doing thousands of other different like articles, video stories, podcast, I don't know, podcasts, radio shows, whatever, way before what you're reading them now.
Right. Yeah.
The media side is so interesting because you got to start out in the middle of nowhere. And for the most part, 90% of us, it seems like we all have to, middle of nowhere, making no money. And you have to, if you have a passion and a love for it, you keep doing it, and you eventually move on up. And a lot of people can do it. Some people can't do it for a lot of very, very variable reasons. But it's just crazy when you look up someone's bio and you see where Sam Amico was working in Wheeling, West Virginia, Bluefield, West Virginia, Casper, Wyoming, Rawlins, Wyoming. And then you see, Cleveland, Akron,
Idaho
Ohio,
Falls,
Idaho Falls.
Yeah.
After West Virginia, I was in Tampa for almost 9 years before moving back here. It's just like everyone's got a little path to where they are now. Even a lot of the writers and TV people and radio people in Cleveland that, if they're from here, good chance they didn't start their career here. They bounced around. So takes a lot of work.
Absolutely.
Hard work.
Andy Baskin started in Montana. He and I talk about our kind of Wyoming, Montana, Rockies connection sometimes.
Yeah.
I mean, probably the first 2 weeks of my time in Rawlins, all I covered was high school swimming. That was it. I was like the high school swimming beat writer, and I didn't know anything about it. I didn't, but by the time I got to West Virginia, I eventually became the sports editor there. I instituted that we do a high school swimming preview every year. And now the sports editor there, who I know, is friends with me, and he curses my name because I started this high school swimming preview 25 years ago.
And it's still going strong?
They have to do it every year because of me, so yeah. And hey, Scott Moskovitz from my Facebook page, big fan. He's got one of those badges. You don't have a badge yet, by the way. We'd share a podcast together.
Badge?
That's exactly it. You don't even know what I'm talking about.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Right, because you're not a top fan of the Amico Hoops Facebook page. That's why you get a badge when you comment and read the page.
See,
Something to shoot for.
I full disclosure, I read you on Twitter every day, not Facebook. But
I
you know
know.
what? I should probably do it. Let's do it right now in real
It's
time.
okay. It's
That
okay.
way,
I like my top fans the way that they are. I don't want people trying to elbow in.
there we go.
But anyway,
I'm on.
Scott said Jeff Phelps was in Texas. He started in Texas. He started, and this is very true. He started in Beaumont, and of course, Jeff Phelps and I are lifelong friends because we grew up on the same street. I don't
There we
know
go. Now
how
I see
many
it. It
people.
pops up. There we go.
Yeah, there
I
you
see you,
go.
Scott.
Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah.
Yep.
Phelps was in Texas, in Beaumont, and I was 15 years old. When I was like 11, 12 years old, Phelps was in college, and I used to ride my bike up to his house, and we'd sit there and look at baseball cards and hang out because he grew up right down the street. He's a big reason I decided to do this because he was like the big brother I never had. And then when he got his job in Beaumont, Texas, I was still in high school, like a freshman, and I would fly down there for a week and hang out with him. And he would take me into the into the TV channel because he was working when I'd be down there. He worked at I think it was KJAC maybe in Beaumont, Texas, Channel 4, I think. But anyway, so I would go with him to work, and that's what influenced me to do this. When I was in high school, I would see him at work, and my takeaway from that, of course, is I told my parents later in life, I'm like, what were you guys thinking? There's no way I would let my 11 or 12-year-old ride his bike up to hang out with a college kid or fly down to Texas to hang out with them down there. But, different era. So, yeah, it was pretty cool. And Phelps obviously
it's like
a great guy.
But you grew up in an era still where hitchhiking was still cool to do.
Yeah. Yeah, I never got into that, but I knew
Thankfully.
people who did. Yeah.
Right.
Who knows if I'd be here today had I. Anyway,
we'd never see you again. It's funny. Broadcasting a lot of times are from people that get influenced by somebody. Jeff Phelps influenced you.
Yeah.
Like as a young kid, you looked up to him. Still do. You guys are still buddies. I remember watching Jeff Phelps all the time on Channel 43.
Yeah.
WAB.
I worked on the weekends with him for $25. I worked at Channel 43 every Saturday night with him when he was hosting the sports. You know what my job was? Watching Cavs games and shot charting important plays. Like if there was an important play, write down the time it happened, and then Jeff would go in and edit it. And they gave me $25 for that. And I got free ground round after because
the ground round.
Phelps would take me to the ground round after the sportscast.
That is a good reference right there. Wow.
It was in Parma.
Talking about shot charting, I remember when I interned that year in 07, I was telling you about with Ernie Harwell in the cigarettes in the progressive field. That year, obviously, the Cavs and LeBron went to the finals.
So, yeah.
I was lucky enough to get a credential for the first two playoff rounds that year. And I would go with Tony Rizzo and his photographer and sit by him during the live shots of his early show on the court. And then for the game, like he would leave, he'd go back and anchor the 10, and then either Dan Coggin or John Tellage would come and cover the game, and I would get to sit in press row there. And on away games during that playoff run, I would sit, my intern cubicle was like diagonal to Tony Rizzo. And so the very first away game of that series, Washington, I think, right? Wizards that year?
Would have been the Gilbert Arenas Wizards.
Rizzo kind of peeks his head over, and we didn't have flat screen monitors. We had big tube monitors on our desks for computers. And he's like, Sabol. And he takes a pad of paper and he tosses it to me like a frisbee. He's like, shot chart this game. And he looks up, points to it. I need to know which buckets to use. And so I'm like, okay. So he had a line written down the middle of it.
Yeah.
Cavs, Wizards, and then you'd go like if this is the screen's the paper, it's cut right down the middle. One side's the Cavs, one side the Wizards, and you do like 2 points LeBron, 2-0 Cavs, 2-2, Caron Butler, 5-2 Damon Jones 3, whatever, all the way down. Then you'd mark quarter, and then you'd give it back to him, and then he'd then give it to the editor, and the editor would then roll tape because it was still tape. And he'd look at the time. Okay, he'd look at the score because there was a score bug in the bottom right-hand corner. It's okay. It was like 55 to 41. We
I
need that
remember
bucket.
those.
So I would do that. That was the first time I ever shot chartered for Rizzo, and I'd give it to him. And I remember one time he looks at me, he's like, "Are you sure you want this dunk? There were so many dunks." And I'm like, "Yeah, that was a good dunk." And you go back. He's like, "Okay, that was a good dunk." He was just testing me, So
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, good
yeah.
time.
No, it must have been similar protocol because that's basically what I would do for Phelps. And like, uh, it was the first time anybody ever paid me to watch an NBA game.
Yeah,
And
that's pretty
now,
cool.
yeah, now it's gotten to the point where I just pay myself, and if I don't
And
go,
by
I
the
get in
way,
trouble.
I was an intern, didn't get paid, so you were very
Wow.
fortunate to be in that situation back then.
Yeah, I think I was still in college when Phelps was doing 43 weekends. But anyway, we're running out of time, and you know why? Because I have a time limit on
Uh-oh.
myself. On
Okay.
myself. No, I don't really. But I told Steve before the show. I said John Sabol sometimes calls me after the news at like 11 o'clock, and we'll get off the phone, or after we record our podcast, like we finish up at midnight, we'll talk until like 3 a.m.
And it's always about,
And
like, constructural stuff. It's sports related.
usually sports related. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
We might throw in something about your dog or
true.
um, Reese, my youngest, who's challenged John to what is it, Mario Kart?
Mario Kart. Yeah, we
Is it?
still need to do
Yeah,
that, by
yeah,
the way.
yeah.
He's
They're
he's
already
talking.
talking. John Sabol and my 7-year-old have been talking smack about Mario Kart repeatedly, which is good because
Yes,
it means he's not talking smack with me.
right.
But anyway, so yeah, what's funny is this is the same thing with Chase. Like you're used to playing point guard on the podcast, and I'm
Mhm.
just the guy who hogs the ball, and now I'm kind of the point guard, but I'm a very clunky point guard. I'm learning. It's like I just got drafted into the NBA, and I'm trying to figure out how to run the point while
You're
professional
getting the
broadcasters such
you're
as
getting the
yourself.
job done, though. It's looking good. It's slick.
Yeah, it's not. I'm like Mike Conley. I think like nobody's gonna pay any attention to him, but he's getting the job done. He's doing
I
okay.
You know who I would compare you to? I would say you're the Terrell Brandon right now.
Terrell Brandon. I was gonna say Darnell Valentine for the old school
Ooh,
Cavs
how about
fans.
that?
If you remember Darnell Valentine.
I do.
So anyway, as far as today's Cavs, very quickly, I mean, we don't really have to be quick, but I'd rather get back to more exciting things. I
Well,
was just
things aren't
thinking,
exciting right now. It's funny. You were talking in the
no,
intro of the show. It's been like this, you know.
yeah, yeah,
Eh,
and the thing that I've noticed, if you like last night, I wrote obviously after the game, and I thought I feel like I'm writing about a different team than I was a month ago. Now, granted, there's injuries, and that's part of it, but this team without Mitchell to me is totally different than it is without anybody else. So they could be missing Garland, they could be missing Mobley, they could be missing Allen or Max Strus or Karis LeVert. Go on down the line, Isaac Okoro. But if they're missing Mitchell, they're a totally different team. It's almost like the old Cavs teams if they were missing LeBron. It's just he is that much a face of this organization now. Whereas before, when they first got him, I think we all kind of thought it would be Mitchell and Garland together. That's not been the case. Mitchell has been the man, and when he doesn't play, they're a totally different team. And I'm not just talking about success, but just the style that they play. So that said, and they weren't playing real great after the All-Star break, even with Donovan Mitchell. So I'm wondering what you think might be different about this than the team that won 17 of 18.
Yeah, I think it's very fascinating that you get out of the break and they're out of rhythm.
Yeah.
They're kind of trugging along. They're being a little lackadaisical. They're turning the ball over. The shots flat. I mean, it looked like a team that went on vacation, and they did. It's called the All-Star break. It happens almost every year for some teams. Some teams better than others. I don't think it's anybody's fault. It is what it is. It's not a coaching thing. It's not a player. I mean, everyone's at fault, I guess. It's coaching everybody, but it's not one particular person. And they're all the players, all kind of acknowledged it. JB acknowledged it. It's just trying to get back in that rhythm. It is really hard to have your foot on the gas. as well as long as they and as great as they played during the month of January and February, winning 16 of 19 or whatever that streak was, and then take a few days off and then get back into it. I mean, it's just hard to do. So that was kind of a slow, progression there. And then you had these two crazy buzzer beater wins, Max Strus's 3 to beat
Yeah.
the Mavericks, and then of course what happened the other night with Boston, with Dean Wade coming out of nowhere. I mean, I was at that game for part of it and covering the Kelsey brothers there and the bobblehead, which by the way, I still have your bobblehead.
You have my bobblehead. Yeah.
I do. And
Okay.
we're thinking going into this game, no Mitchell. This is before Mobley got hurt. You don't have Strus. Okoro's elbow isn't 100%. And there's just a lot of, you can call Levert's not playing, or his elbows still isn't great either. And then you just think, yeah, we're making excuses, but these are legitimate reasons too.
Yeah.
The spread on that game was 9.5, I believe. And I
Right.
remember looking at my photographer during the warm up saying, Cavs will be lucky to lose this game by 12 points.
Yeah.
And for most of the game, they were
blown out. Yeah.
Yeah. And then all of a sudden, Dean Wade caught fire. You take those two surprising buzzer beater wins and the comeback in Boston, this Cavs team's in a much different place, Sam. I mean, they really are.
Yeah, right. I mean, you're talking about a pretty extensive losing streak. They had that game against the Wizards where they didn't play that great.
Right.
Remember against Washington right after the break that they won that game. But even after that game, JB Bickerstaff was like, we're not playing with the same spirit. And that was after a win. But no, without that buzzer beater from Strus, which was 59-footer beyond half court, and then without the Dean Wade breakout game the other night, they're looking at a pretty lengthy losing streak.
You're looking at a 38-24 record instead of 40-22. I mean, you'd still be in the third spot in the Eastern Conference where they currently are now, half game back in Milwaukee for the second seed. But it's just those two wins in the struggling that they've been playing and the stretch they're going to go on now is just, it's lucky. Let's be honest, it's lucky, but it's also crucial. It is just so good. It's great that they have those wins now because the schedule doesn't get any easier for them. But back to your point about Donovan Mitchell, the Cavs, I think, are 8 in. They have like a close 8-6 record without Donovan Mitchell this year, something like that.
Something like that. It's close. It's around 500.
Right. And they rely on him too much, I think. And this knee injury, we need to keep an eye on this because this didn't happen in practice, didn't happen in a game. What happened? It was a cumulative thing.
Yeah.
JB Bickerstaff acknowledged it was a wear and tear injury. His minutes are, skyrocketing. It's, career year minutes. He's not getting the support. Darius Garland and Evan Mobley haven't had that second best year that we were expecting them to have. Mitchell's carrying the load. Like you mentioned, it's like a LeBron, I don't want to say 2.0 because it happened again. It's LeBron 3.0. And they need to watch him going into the playoffs.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in that double overtime loss to the Bulls, that I think he played 44 minutes. Here's the other thing, John. When I first started covering the NBA, that's changed in say 2007 that was my first year too when they went to the finals as a full-time writer. Covering the Cavs was the year they went to the finals with LeBron and got swept by San Antonio. They're working out, and this is obviously just speculation and a theory on my part, but they're going through first of all, a couple of weeks ago, this has happened twice this season. I've gotten to the Cavs games. We get there early. We get their game tips off at 7. We get up there about 4:30, the media. Well, I'm casually walking through the arena, and a security guard stops me, which never used to happen. And he's like, hey, wait, they're having a private practice, so you can't come through this way.
Sam, they did that 2 nights ago against Boston.
Yeah, and I didn't say anything. I was just like, oh, okay. But inside I'm thinking, practice? You've got a game in 2 hours. Not to sound like Allen Iverson, but they have a game in 2 hours, and they're going through a practice before the game. And then a couple of guys, like old timers who former NBA players have told me, have said, why are and this isn't obviously just limited to the Cavs. This is the entire NBA. He's like,
Right.
why are these guys going through full body workouts before games? He said some of these. One of the a Cavs legend once told me, and he didn't tell me. He told me in private, so I'm not going to name him. But he's like, some of these guys need showers before the game because they're working out so hard before the game. And by working out, it means putting up a ton of shots, going in the weight room, working up a big sweat, and then they got to go take a shower before they put on their actual uniform half the time. And it's just, to me, that's like, you are putting so much more stress. And when I first started covering the NBA and when I first started following it, they came out, went up through the layup line. Now, like maybe Larry Bird would do a couple of jogging laps around the arena or something, but they'd come out and go through the layup line. That was their pregame warm-up. Now you're having practices before games, which I know it's not a daunting practice, but at the same time, they're out there, they're doing this stuff that to me, it's just like, you're wearing the body down. I don't care how young you are and how much, because I mean, on top of this, they've got regular practice that they go to. They go to shoot around. We've seen them, John. We're allowed in there after practice. They're still putting up shots and going through drills and all that stuff on their own. And to me, it's just like, if you want to ask me why guys used to play 82 games, like Michael Jordan only, he had that 1 year where he blew out his foot or whatever, his Achilles or something like that. I think it was a broken foot. And then he came back too soon. He came back. He told the Bulls, I'm going to play. And they were upset about it. And then he scored 63 against the Celtics in the playoffs. But other than that, you look at like Michael Jordan, for instance, he played almost 82 games every year. There was a couple of games where he only played 80. When Michael Jordan was 40 and he's playing with the Wizards, he played all 82 games that season. And he played pretty well. So I think that, there's something to these guys just maybe being over-practiced, overworked by the teams. They put their own work in too. I don't know, because the NBA has lost part of its luster a little bit because people are tired of going to games and the stars don't play.
Yeah, load management is the worst thing that's ever happened.
Load management, even real injuries are frustrating because it's like, why aren't now all of a sudden these NBA teams have like 7 people working in the medical, the like medical personnel, and it's like, why are there so many injuries when we have more medical personnel and more trainers? JB Bickerstaff said that. He said the joke around here is the more medical people we hire, the more injuries there are, and
the trainer has a trainer, and the trainer has a doctor, and the doctor has a doctor, and the doctor has a nutritionist, and the nutritionist has whatever. It's funny. Look back at the old Cavs. How many times when you watch old videos, and any of our younger viewers need to do this, go on YouTube and like Google like 1991 or 93 Cavs, early 90s, and you'll see on the bench, you'll see like Lenny Wilkins, Brian Winters, the assistant coach, and a couple other assistants. I think maybe Ron Rothstein was one of them. Sidney Lowe, was he? He was an assistant then.
3 assistants at most.
3
assistants at most. Usually 2, but sometimes 3.
And then, Sam, the rosters were smaller back then too. I think the roster was maybe 12 or 13.
It was 12 guys. That was
12 guys. So you had 7 players on the bench, and then you had 1 trainer, and that trainer was the legendary Gary Briggs.
Yeah.
Which is funny because Sam just mentioned moments ago that we were on the phone one night till 3 a.m. Remember we were talking about Cavs, and I'm like, whatever happened to Gary Briggs? Is he still alive? And we looked him up. He retired a few years ago. He was a trainer for the Utah Jazz forever, and we found his LinkedIn page. I'm like, man, he still looks like the same Gary Briggs. Now he's got a goatee. Anyways,
he lives in Salt Lake City. Yeah.
Yes. Loves to fish and do all outdoor stuff. Anyway, but you saw 1 coach or 1 trainer. Now
that was it.
That was it. Now 1 guy falls and hurts themselves. It's a huddle of guys. It's like you have a finger.
No, I know.
Doctor, you have a nose.
I think it's a combination of things. I really do. I think it's a combination of overworked in terms of their practice situations. And I think that it's not necessarily the teams or the players. It's just kind of this basketball culture that we've created. We've become this monster, with AAU and going down to the lower levels, people only able to play 1 sport instead of 4 like we used to. And I think I think that's kind of part of it. And I think the other part of it is too, people are getting held out with hangnails. That's just that's just the way I look at it. I think that there's no reason that we should have so many players injured in today's game when this league survived for years without this. And now, you know, what is going on? I think it's a combination of things. And I also think guys are held out too much. And I don't think it's on the players. I think that's on the teams. I think the teams are like, well, you know, we better rest this or, you know, whatever. But I just think it's, to me, you play in the games. If you got to sit out practices, if you got to play less minutes, if you got to, because this is a business, the product is a business, and you want your best product out there for when people are paying for it. Nobody cares what happens at practice because nobody watches and nobody's paying that. Nobody cares what happens at shoot around. I know, like some coaches like Ty Lue, he hates the morning shoot around, hates it, wishes the league would do away with it. And I've mentioned that to the league, and the league told me, you know, in the league office, they're like, well, we don't force anybody to do that. And I'm like, well, then it's just going to take one or two coaches to do away with it. So obviously the Cavs have all kinds of injury issues and just have not been the same team. So anyway, John, are you glad that you came on now that I've talked the entire time?
No, I could be here all day. It's great. You know, one thing on the injury front that I think that people don't necessarily realize too is that when you see these guys, I mean, I think the league in general has become soft. Not that these players are soft in terms of
no, yeah,
it's a league-wide issue, and
right.
Some of these players are they're all legit hurt. A lot of them are, except when you have some that are doing load management.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's not all the players. Sometimes it's like you say, it's the front office pulling these guys to do this.
Medical personnel telling the coaches these guys need to sit. Yeah.
And I can tell you, and you know this too. There are players in the league that don't like that. That can't stand it.
No,
because they think it makes them look bad. But one thing is for sure, the Cavs situation currently, these are legit injuries, and it's a concern. They need to get healthy. I think you and I were talking about this one day with that run in January and February. I said, I have a concern with this run is that they're peaking too early because you're peaking in the part of the schedule
middle of the year
before the All-Star break. I mean, that's good that you're beating up on bad teams. You're building up. Your good teams take care of bad teams, and the Cavs did that in a big way. And so they padded their record and padded their standings a little bit. Now you're getting hurt. Now there's one silver lining to this. Mobley and Garland got hurt earlier in the year before Christmas. And everyone spelled that was going to spell doom and gloom, and it didn't.
Right.
Now we have injuries to these guys, and we're about 6 weeks away from the playoffs. So if you're going to get hurt, you want to kind of get hurt now. That way you can rest up. The problem with that, Sam, is the schedule, even though if you go on a lot of different websites, they can tell you that, oh, the Cavs have one of the easiest remaining schedules. They say that because if you look at what they have, there's a lot of bad teams in there, and it's weighted bad, meaning like you're playing the Hornets twice. You're going to play the Grizzlies, and you're going to play the Rockets, and you're going to play the Nets. But I mean, coming up here, you got the Timberwolves tomorrow. You're going to play Phoenix twice before the end of the year. You're going to play the Lakers again. I know the Lakers aren't great either, but you got LeBron.
Well, right. Yeah.
Indiana's always going to be tough. Philly and Denver. I mean, not to mention Miami too. So the schedule isn't doing them any favors, especially when you see two little mini road trips here coming up. So they got to just kind of slide by because the other problem that no one's talking about, the Milwaukee Bucks are playing a lot better of late.
Yeah.
They've won 7 of 10. The win streak just got snapped the other day, and they climbed right up on the Cavs' heels. And currently, as we talking here on Thursday, are leading up. Have half a game up on them for that.
Spot. And the nice thing for the Cavs, that's kind of the thing that it's like, Milwaukee. I suspect Milwaukee's going to finish second, but the Cavs seem to have a pretty good hold right now on third because they're 4 games up over Orlando and the Knicks.
3.5. 3.5 on the Magic, 4 on the Knicks.
Okay, so I mean, to me, when you look at the rest of the Eastern Conference, it doesn't really matter to me if you finish second or seventh, because if you're second, you're probably going to have to play the Miami Heat. If you're second or sixth, second or third. And if you're third, you're probably going to have to play, you may end up playing Philly with Joel Embiid back in the first round. So, or Miami. I mean, it's just
or
going to be, it's
Indiana,
not going to be easy for the Cavs.
or
Indiana's
Indiana
a
too.
bad matchup for the Cavs. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, all of those teams are certainly capable of beating the Cavs. And the Cavs are capable of beating them too. So,
Yeah.
But I mean, there's a reason the race is so tight, right? Because everybody's pretty close to even, and anything can happen. But yeah, I just think the Cavs need to play better to not necessarily win, but they gotta play better in the course of games, and they haven't done that without Mitchell. And frankly, John, we'll talk about this later on the podcast, but I as well without Donald playing point, Darius Garland point. It's not a shot at Garland. Would you agree that they've done a little bit better?
You cut out a little bit there, but I think I kind of get the gist of what you're.
Hey, John, can you hear me okay now? Okay.
Yeah, I can hear you now. Yeah, you cut out a little bit there, but I think you're talking about Garland. I actually have a point on Garland. You need Darius now to kind of take the role here. You need him to take the reins. What we had seen in his rookie year. He's taking a step back with Donovan, and he's had a rough start this year. The injury was a big problem for him. I mean, he's open. He talked about it. He's upset with himself in a way. He's frustrated. I thought it was kind of cute to hear him say last weekend after, I forget which game it was over the weekend. I remember I was watching it at Fox 8, and then we did a recap of it. And I think it was after either the Pistons or it was after the Pistons win. Yes, it was, because he referenced the Bulls game because he played well against Chicago. He had like 23 points that night or something. And then the Pistons, he had 29, hit 6 threes. So now it's come back to me. The question was asked, like, I think Serena Winters asked him on the court, what's changed? Why are you having this recent surge in points and just production with Donovan out? And his response was, my grandma's home. She's staying with me. And, she's giving me that extra the extra like love and passion. And, that grandma's cooking, fueling him in a way. And, he's relaxed and he's kind of getting to rhythm. And so you saw that for the most part. And I thought that was neat, he's really close with his family, really close with his grandmother, obviously. And you saw that even though that double overtime loss against Chicago, not his fault, obviously. And then you saw it again against Detroit. The Knicks game was just tough. It was just a bad matchup. A lot of things went wrong. And I mean, Darius, this Cavs team is, in my opinion, Sam, now as we look at this, you need Darius Garland to be that consistent number 2. And we've talked about on the podcast extensively the last 2 years, and injuries have not helped him. And he just has not been that guy. And when will he be that guy? Will he be that guy? Now's a good time to see it. We need to see it heading into the playoffs with Donovan out at least the next 2 games. He'll be reevaluated this weekend. But you need to see a little bit more out of Darius Garland, and he'll be the first to tell you that too. You need more consistency out of him because you're not getting that right now.
Right. And that's that to me is really when you talk about success or kind of clunkiness, it starts with the guys who have the ball in their hands. And, I think Cavs fans everywhere are rooting for Darius. He's a good guy, and he's still a productive player. He's just, I think that he as you said, he will tell you he needs to be better. And he's still doing pretty well statistically. It's just a matter of how is the offense running when the ball's in your hands. But anyway, John, thanks so much for joining me today. I know that you'll be back at some point. I hope.
I will be back. Thank you for having me. We had a good time going down memory lane.
After this. Yeah. We'll have to do that again. But I guess I will talk to you in about 3 or 4 hours for the podcast.
Yeah,
We'll be recording a Cavs on the Break podcast today, and tonight. And John will go back to playing point guard, and they'll move me back to ball hog. And that's the roles that we're comfortable with. I like to get the ball, dominate the ball, and you know how it goes.
Hey,
You've been podcasting with me long enough.
You know, that Terrell Brandon comp was actually that's a good compliment because he was on the cover of Sports Illustrated that '97 season and was labeled the best point guard in the NBA.
Yeah. Well, now the cover of Sports Illustrated's AI generated, right?
Right. Yes. Well, we're going to be recording another podcast tonight. It'll be released tomorrow morning. I wouldn't be doing my job, Sam, if I couldn't plug it real quick. Because I know Chase Smith, our other co-host, would be like, gotta plug the podcast. We record it once a week, Sam, Chase, and I, and we just recap what's going on with Cavs. And everything NBA. I'll throw some random trivia stuff out there. Sam's going to give us all the lowdown on rumors. We got a lot of good reminiscing of old Cavs stuff, good conversation. But most importantly, to get the latest on that, make sure you go and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, Spotify, Apple, and follow us on Twitter if you want, and we'll be giving you out some new content. New episode will be recorded tonight and will drop tomorrow, Friday morning.
Well, the difference between the podcast and this show is, sadly, on the podcast you don't get to see our beautiful faces.
That's true, but you can listen to us while you drive, or you know, cutting the grass once
you
it's
can do that.
warmer out.
You could do that with this show. You could take 330 to go anywhere. Hey, you know what? I told Chase that I was trying to trademark the slogan, "Let's 330 to go." I've got to clear it with the people who run 330 to go, but
yeah, you could.
I'm on my way.
And they throw merch on it too.
With this trademarking, huh?
Then you get some merch on it, like your slogan on a shot glass or on a pint glass,
right?
Or
exactly.
on a polo or something.
Tattoo. I was thinking a tattoo, maybe one on my neck. Yeah,
I was thinking more like right here on your cheek or something.
Yeah, that might be nice too.
I don't think Katie would let you back in the house.
No, nobody. Yeah, right. So, well, brother, it's always good to talk to you. I'll talk to you in a few hours. Thanks for joining us. Everybody, thanks for joining us. This has been, not surprisingly, with John Sabol as my guest, my first hour-long show, and which we could have gone like 4 hours. So we won't do that to anybody. But so thanks for joining us, everybody. And we will talk to you again next Thursday, 6 o'clock, or whenever you want to watch this anywhere else. All right. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, John.
No problem. Thank you, Sam.